Welcome everyone to the 52nd episode of Cope, Fifi, and Cleosophy on MSP Waves. How's it going tonight, dude?
Yeah, doing all right. Just got clipped off a bit at the end there. But yeah, shrimp on a barbie, dingo babies, all that kind of stuff. How we doing, peeps?
Word. Yeah, it's funny. Like, I actually looked at a map of Australia, I want to say, like, sometime over the last week, and I've noticed that, like, it seems like all of the actual, like, cities that I've heard of are just kind of, like, chilling on, like, the southeast coast.
Well, let's get it around. Just depends on where you're looking. We've got the East Coast, West Coast, everybody, and everything in between. But yeah, it's all sort of like coastal based. The middle of Australia. I mean, you can really live there if you want to. I mean, like if you really tried, but you probably wouldn't want to. It's like desert and dry and all that.
Yeah,
Cockatoos yelling.
that's like where Crocodile Dundee went in the second movie, right?
I believe he would have been up near the Northern Territory. That's where all the crocs are at. That being said, I haven't seen the movie in a long time, so I'd just be having a guess out my ass.
Weird. Can anybody actually hear us tonight, or I don't know what's going on, people?
Get some confirmation happening there in the chat space. Can y'all hear us?
Yeah. Oh God, they went and found Jeff Irwin. Oh man.
Oh, Swoop's here and can't hear apparently, but he's trollalicious. So yeah, as much as he keeps claiming that he's not trolling, here he is trolling.
Yeah. Well, I heard that he's like half deaf, but like only on the upper half. Yeah. So maybe he can like hear out of his ass, since like that's where he talks out of his ass all the time.
Ooh, that's cold, man. That's cold.
Yeah. Yeah. Real talk philosophy. Ooh.
Yeah.
Let's see. I don't know, man. It's been a crazy week. I think we could all say it seems like every time we turn around, somebody's dying, and then yeah, I honestly don't even know where to really begin with what happened in New Zealand, but all we can
hmm
really say for sure, without like trying to either buy into mainstream narrative or jump into a conspiracy theory, is that people died for some more bullshit reasons because somebody wanted to push an agenda, and yeah, I mean, it sucks.
Well, look, one thing I can definitely say is the last a few weeks to a couple of months has been a little bit dark for me myself. I've been sort of like brushing with the darker side of humanity and trying to report on it. And just as I was sort of like saying to someone in one of the responses on Steam, and I was like, yeah, like it's been a pretty dark time. I think I'm going to have to like take a break from observing humanity because there's like so much darkness there, um, and sort of like start observing the universe and do something different. Yeah, this happens like hours later, and I don't know. Like I said, I think maybe it's something that we need to focus on a bit more. I mean, there's been a lot of sort of like media, sort of like blackout on some of these things. Have been um, holding things back, and there's just like all this stuff going on. Like, don't observe what's happened is basically what the message is. Some of the messages that I've seen on social media is kind of like don't even look at what the bad guys have done and leave it at that. But I'm just like, is that really the mentality we want to have here? Is just kind of like sweep it away and not try and understand it? Because the only real way to sort of like stop it from happening in the future is to understand it, to dissect it, to pull it apart, and see what makes it tick, and maybe during that process we can find the means of avoiding these kinds of things in the future.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I guess you could say like one of the things that I've kind of noticed is after these things happen, there's always like the people that try to figure out why, and then there's like always the people that try to like look further into it and figure out like why really, you know. But one
Mm.
thing that I know is like by the time we're even hearing about it, you know, like we're hearing a controlled narrative about like what actually happened.
Mm.
So while while one thing we can say for sure is like this dude up, like he was live streaming, you know, like the attacks, which is pretty insane. But yeah, like I think we can definitely say that like you know it happened. Like I mean, sometimes like these events happen, and like we can't even really say whether or not something technically happened, right? Because like in the U.S., we'll have like issues where I mean, like we think there's crisis actors involved. I mean, we think a lot of this stuff is government manipulation, and like even when we're pretty sure something did happen, you know, like say like Sandy Hook or something, um, you know, like we have no way to know whether it really happened like the way that they tell us it happened, or if you know, like let's say a kid went to school and like shot a couple of people, right? But then they turned it into shot like tons of people, and you know,
Mm-hmm.
it seems like these things always happen like right before a gun debate comes up too. So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, like I'm not trying to like offend anyone whenever I say like question the narratives here, but especially like living in the U.S., I can tell you like I don't believe in coincidence, and you know, like whenever you can start to see the pattern that there's always some kind of like mass shooting that happens right before a gun debate is about to be going through with the new government, it's kind of like at this point like we should just be expecting it, you know, like a week, 2 weeks before the next gun debate that we're planning in Congress. Like just watch, we'll probably be having another one, and you know, I mean, it's sad, right? Because you know, like if 9/11 taught us anything, you know, you can't have a fake terrorist attack without dead bodies. You know, like it doesn't work like that. Even if you want to say like the government just like knew about it and didn't actually stop it, um, for whatever reason, you know, these things get allowed to get played out, and we basically just see people, you know, like not even thinking about just like the people that actually like died directly in the attacks, but like you know everything that we do causes ripples. So everyone that those people knew are all affected in some kind of way. People that didn't even know them that were you know, just like they live in the area now they're living in fear, like wondering if there's going to be more attacks. People like around the world are wondering, you know, is this like the new norm? It's like it pushes so much fear out into the world, and it's just it perpetuates that cycle of negativity and that cycle of like fear and don't trust people, and you know, I think like it does more to push people into like a subservient position, and you know, like basically give up your freedoms to get that illusion of security, right? And this
Mm-hmm.
is like whenever we can start seeing things like gun control, for example, in the U.S. Like we already know criminals don't obey laws, right? So, well, whenever you pass a law to disarm the population, who is it really benefiting? Because the criminals aren't going to follow the law anyway. Like, you're not going to see criminals lining up to turn in guns because they're afraid of a mass shooting. Like, it just doesn't work like that. What you're going to do is you disarm the population for whatever agenda is behind that. And, you know, like it doesn't benefit anyone because whenever people actually have guns and can defend themselves against stuff like this, that's how you stop it. Like you're not gonna be calling 911 during an active shooting and hoping that the police get there before they kill everyone. Like it just doesn't work like that. Either the police have to already be there and be like actively trying to stop whatever's going on, or you're gonna be waiting what, like 15, 20 minutes under like the best circumstances, hoping that cops show up. Like
Mhm.
it doesn't make sense.
Yeah. And even then, it's not enough. I mean, the live stream from this guy was 17 minutes. And when this guy was leaving, you could kind of like hear sirens in the background, kind of thing, and that was it. So like 17 minutes, still no one was there. Um, that being said, though, a lot of people like, and I knew it was kind of knew it was going to happen. That people were going to say, well, if they had guns, it wouldn't have happened, right? They would have been able to fight back. But look, here's the thing. I mean, we're talking about a place of worship here. Like, there's been plenty of times I've seen people getting in trouble for bringing weapons into the house of God and these kinds of things. So, like, realistically speaking, here there wouldn't have been weapons, even if every single person was strapping. They wouldn't have been able to take them into the place of worship. So that's not really part of the situation here. And realistically, I'm not here to talk about gun control and that kind of thing either. It's that's kind of like a byproduct of what's going on here. That being said, though, I have heard the Prime Minister of New Zealand talking about reforming gun laws and making some changes to the legislation to, take particular weapons, semi-automatic weapons, off the owned list in New Zealand. That being said, they've got similar rules and regulations to what we do here in Australia in regards to you need to have a license and that kind of thing. But look, I think that's kind of like beside the point of what we're getting at here. I think we want to look at more the thoughts, the feelings, the intentions that sort of like led to this. Because if we look into the person themselves, well, for starters, they're Australian. So um, this person went from Australia to New Zealand to do these things. And from what I understand, from what I've read, the research that I've done, this person seemed to be, um, considerably ordinary in some sense. There has been some new data coming forward in regards to the type of individual that he was, and some people were saying he wasn't very well liked, and he was awkward around women and couldn't really speak to them, and he had this, there was like these bits and pieces coming out. But the long and short of what I'm getting at here is that we need to look at what was it that happened here, because one of the things that's being said is that about 9 years ago, his father committed suicide. He was going through so like having cancer and that kind of thing. It was a pretty horrible situation. So, I mean, obviously that plays some part in it. But I've also seen things where they said that this man traveled the world and he had gone through places that were sort of like that had people of high rates of being Muslim, and he even wrote on his Facebook, they're warm people and blah 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 blah. Like it was very harsh change. Like something happened from this point where everything was cool till like a 2 to 3 year period where something happened and this person was radicalized. And I think this is what we need to focus on, because realistically, it's something that we're all susceptible to, and it's kind of something that I've been kind of like leaning on for the past a few months. When I'm talking about social identity theory and that kind of thing, where becoming part of a group means something and what it means to us and how we interact with that. And I think this is just another example of that. It's something that's gone on that has triggered this, and it's come out like this. And I think it's a warning that we should all take on board, because it could happen to any one of us, and we need to be careful of it. So that's why I think it's important to talk about these things and analyze them and pull them apart, so we can take notes and apply these things in our real world scenarios with the people that we interact with, and when we think about our own thoughts and feelings and expressing that in the world.
You know, I feel like it's definitely one of those tricky situations, right? Because like we talked about this before when Azaria and Julia came on, but like especially whenever we're talking about quote unquote hate groups, right? Like
Hmm.
let's assume there's no like government agenda here. Like let's assume, take it at face value, this is what it was. It was a hate group attack. Specifically, it sounds like either white supremacist or some kind of incel group, right? Uh, let's assume, for the sake of this discussion, that that's legitimately what happened. Like I'm all for trying to like understand and find some kind of compassion and like ability to relate to people, but like in some of these situations, I get to the point where it's trying to understand insanity is only going to make me insane, you know? It's like
Hmm.
I can fully understand that they're a human being for whatever fucked up shit happened in their life. They feel that it's their prerogative to go out and do harm to others. You know, like I can see that. Like I've been angry before. I've been in like a hurt place. Like I understand when you want to like retaliate and seek some kind of justice at other people's expense. But whenever you get to the point that you go and attack random strangers to further like whatever your agenda is, I feel like that's where it's like completely lost on me, right? Like,
Hmm.
obviously, you have to be coming from a place where you feel like all of society or like all of this specific group has like in some way like ruined your life. Because like when you do something like this, you pretty much gotta like fully understand you're throwing your life away. Like, there's no like coming back from this. Like, even if you don't die, like you're never getting out of jail. Like you're not gonna plead insanity and like get out in 20 years after you do a mass murder. Yeah, I mean, like I understand that there's like some kind of need for like criminal pathology and like understanding like what pushes people to these places and trying to figure out ways to like counteract it. But I don't know. Like I can't say if it's right or wrong, but like all I can say is like I don't really want to understand, you know, like and be able to really, I guess you could say like see things from that perspective because like to actually like see things from that perspective like you really have to be in that mindset and you really just want to go out and do as much harm as humanly possible and you know like I don't think you can like really get there without wanting to be there. You know what I'm saying? Like I don't think you can just see something from that perspective and also be a well.
Hmm.
I don't really want to say like well adjusted, but I mean like you know it's kind of like the complete opposite perspective of how I live my life, right? So like being in that headspace doesn't seem like something that would ever bring me joy or like make my life better. And I don't know, it's rough. Like I really I don't know one where you find the people that want to do this, and two like I just like I don't know how to help those people that want to try to like get in someone's head that would do something like this and understand and you know like try to like I'm totally on board with the try to prevent things like this from happening in the future aspect of it. But
Hmm.
you know what I'm saying? Like getting into that
Yeah.
mind space just seems like it would be detrimental.
I think for myself, it's more along the lines of like, let's just use an example here, like something that's different but still kind of the same. When we look at, say, like the domestic violence situation. Now, for people that sort of like get into these situations, we've had this discussion before, right? Where it's like if you went out with someone on the first date and you sort of like, you had a nice time and everything, and at the end of the date, instead of giving you a kiss, they punched you in the face, you wouldn't go out with that person again, would you? No. Now, the thing is over a period of time, there is something that happens where an individual finds these things to be acceptable. It happens slowly. It happens over time. There is manipulation. These kinds of things, and you know, if we analyze these things, as uncomfortable as it may be to do so, if we analyze these things, we can pull things apart. We got Stockholm syndrome. There's all these different bits and pieces we can put together and go, okay, well, this is what we understand of it. This is the nooks and crannies. We've dissected it, and we have some kind of answer. And there's things we can look out for. You can jump on the internet, type it into Google, and there'll be a list of things you should look out for domestic violence situations, whether it's physical, whether it's financial, or anything else. There's multiple ways of of having domestic violence happen. But there's things that we can look at and go, okay, well, here are some signs. Here are some things we can look for, and not just look around and say, oh, this person next to me, this person over there, this person that I know, but for ourselves, and we're going through it ourselves. And this is what I'm saying, because we have to be understanding that this could happen to any one of us. And okay, it may not be in this particular area where we're talking about, it's a racial thing, but in the past we've talked about politics, we've talked about religion, we've talked about battles of the sexes, we've talked about all these different bits and pieces, and it's all basically two groups interacting with one another, and the radical side of it that comes out, the violence that comes forward, like all these bits and pieces. So bringing that back over to what I'm saying here, if we pull these things apart and we try and understand them and go, okay, well, what is it that happened that turned this individual who may have been, all right, we can single him out and say, okay, he was a bit awkward around people. Apparently had a video game addiction and bits and pieces, right? But we can look at these things and go, okay, well, is this something that I am leaning towards? Is there someone around me that's sort of like in the vicinity of being able to be taken for this ride and become radicalized? And that's what I'm saying. Like, it's not so much about putting yourself in the mindset and being like, oh, what's it like to be a psycho killer that runs around and randomly kills people? No, not at all. That's not what I'm getting at. But if we can pull it apart and we can try and understand it, we can look for the signs in our everyday life and be able to pick these things out and go, okay, well, this could be a problem. I need to get this looked at. I need to see somebody because I'm having these feelings, or I'm seeing someone who's like that, and maybe have a conversation with them and say, okay, well, I understand that you're feeling like a little bit, off, or there's things that are going on. You may be feeling depressed and down, or like for whatever reason, and try and get that help before it gets this far. Like nip it in the butt before it turns into an issue. I guess that's kind of like the angle that I'm coming from.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that makes sense. I think part of that's just being aware of other people, though, right? Like, if how could you really be, like fully aware of somebody that's either pushed themselves completely into isolation, or, like their only social interactions are within an echo chamber of a hate group, right? Like, these aren't people you're going to be running into, like in your social circles, or, like maybe you would see them in public, like, stocking up on weapons and ammunition or something like that, but.
But that's kind of like an extreme view. That's what I'm saying. Like, we need to pull that apart, right? Because we have this concept that crazy people are just out there and they're stockpiling weapons and they've got crazy eyes and they never brush their hair and they stink, and like all these like bits and pieces. This is a human being. They're an ordinary person. They knew people. They had friends. They had family. But nobody picked up on the situation until it happened. Even the government themselves said that this person was not on a list of, like people that needed to be watched or anything. They went completely under the radar. Why? Because they were just a normal human being going through some shit, and something happened. There was something that went on that turned them into this person. Whether, and we can go into conspiracy like theory central, or there were brainwashed, there was a government organization, or like whatever. It doesn't matter, right? The point is that a person who is of sound mind would not go into the situation and go like, yeah, well, this seems normal. I'll do this. Yep, no problems. A person who is of sound mind would go like, this is weird. This is strange. This is a sensation that I don't like, or whatever it is. So what I'm saying is, we need to recognize that this is something that can happen to anybody who has, even if you just had a few bad weeks, something's gone on in your life, you lost your job, you've broken up with your partner, blah, blah, blah. You could be susceptible to becoming radicalized. And like I said, in this situation, we're talking a very hardcore extreme here, right? But there are other levels of it. And like I said, I think for me, the focus is, what is it that sort of like led to this in the first place? And how can we get on top of it before it turns into something? Because, this week it's racial tension, blah, 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 etc. Next week it's going to be, political tensions, and again and again and again. And like, you just add another couple of groups, add another couple of radicals, and here we go. We've got another news story. And this is what I'm saying. Like, we need to recognize this within ourselves if we want to put an end to it.
Yeah, I think like what I could say is, like, from the way that I guess you could say, like, I try to stop things from like ever going too far in a negative direction, or like even other people I've seen, whenever I can tell you one thing about like being very active online in a lot of different online communities is like you can tell when people are, for lack of a better word, like unstable, right? And like one of the things like I'll notice is whenever people's views like start getting almost like to that level of what I would call like self-righteous I don't know, like I'm not trying to like say these words in like offensive ways, but like basically where people start feeling like their worldview is like the only way that's right, and like other people are in some way like negatively impacting the world, right? And they get in like that self-righteous mindset to where they feel like it's almost like their duty to actively stop other people from ruining whatever their view of the world is. Like basically people that can't try to like find any kind of like common ground or perspective with others. And
Bigotry, essentially.
yeah, but I mean like it doesn't always come across as like necessarily bigotry, right? Like it can be like for example, like somebody that's like really passionate about like organic food can get to the point where they're talking about like somebody should go and like destroy Monsanto or something, right? Well, I mean, whenever you see people like kind of like getting like these extreme views, like a lot of people tend to just kind of like clam up or like avoid it and like look at that person like this dude's like a little nutty or something. But usually like I'll try to like engage those people and just feel like, yeah, well, look, you can't go around just like destroying everything you don't believe in, right? Like you got to try to kind of find some kind of way to peacefully coexist. And like in my experience, what I think like a lot of times is going on is people get like so focused on the problems that they see in the world that they're not focused on their own lives and trying to like in some way like better their life, right? That they're just too hung up on that one thing. And I think like whenever you like let it fester and you focus on and it can kind of like push you into a place of isolation, right? Like other people get tired of hearing it. You feel like other people don't understand you because they don't see, like just how horrible this is. Like Monsanto is essentially the same thing as the Nazi Holocaust, right? Like how do you people not see this? So like whenever they start spouting stuff like that, and people are kind of like looking at them like, okay, this dude's a nutter, like I'm just gonna walk away. Well, I think that's kind of saying like as society, whenever we start abandoning people that are getting into that like headspace and starting to kind of like self-destruct and isolate, like what we're doing is we're essentially like enabling these people to find, I guess what you could say is like other people that have like these similar kind of like extremist views like them, and then that's when they end up in these like echo chamber groups that are really just like perpetuating whatever their vitriol and hate is, like whatever the thing is that they don't like. If they've isolated themselves and been like so self-destructive that they can't peacefully coexist with normal people that don't feel this way or like don't necessarily see it as such like an extreme problem, then what happens is like when we let them go and like let them just like basically cut themselves off from the group, I guess would be a good way to put it, then we're kind of like enabling it in some way, right? Like we're basically telling these people like, look, your views are too extreme. We don't want anything to do with you, and we kind of push them to this place in some way by our lack of compassion or like our lack of even trying to interact or comprehend. Like, I'm not saying we should all feel guilty every time somebody does this shit, but I'm saying, like, we have to kind of, like, look at it from that place of, if we can't find compassion and understanding for people, then this is naturally where they go.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. And this is why, like for myself, why I think it's important for us to dissect these things and pull them apart so we can understand them, so we can see these things as they form and have that kind of empathy, compassion, and understanding for these people when we are interacting with them. Because realistically, like I said, I've read a few bits and pieces about this person. I don't know them personally, but it's just what I'm reading, and what I found during my investigation. Now, one of the things that was alarming for me was a comment that was made in regards to something that this person used to do, which is like he was addicted to video games, loved video games, and wouldn't get off them, to a point where he would rather urinate on the floor where he was playing video games and computer games than go to the bathroom. And nobody did anything. It was just kind of like, well, he really loves his video games, and like there was no flags. Like, this is what I mean. Like, if we can pull this thing apart and start looking at some of these things and go, okay, well, here are some issues. There are some psychological issues that are happening here. There is some problems here. We need to analyze them. And in regards to what we're saying about groups and these kinds of things, with social identity theory and all that kind of stuff, like the things like we're all part of groups, right? Every single one of us from the moment that we're born, right? The country that we're born in, the religion that we're given, sex, gender, political views, all these different bits and pieces. Like, we're all parts of these things. Even if you joined groups, like say you play soccer on the weekend, you're part of a soccer club, right? We're all part of these groups, and there's nothing wrong with being part of a group. That's fine, right? The problem I find, what I think the problem is when we start identifying ourselves, like we define ourselves by these groups. It's not just we are part of this group. It's like being part of this group is everything that I am. And this is where we start having these issues, because when people have differing views and these kinds of things, we start taking it really personal. Instead of being like, well, it's just someone who has different thoughts and feelings than I do. It's like, well, this is a personal attack on me because this is me, this is part of my identity. I am a soccer player. How dare you say that soccer is for pansies? And I get really upset and I want to get into a fist fight with you. Fisticuffs, if you will. So I think if we start looking at these things and trying to deal with it in a point and getting people to understand that, we shouldn't be defining ourselves by being part of these groups, right? Regardless of what it is, right? We should define ourselves by our characters and our behaviors, who we are, like the intrinsic values that we have within ourselves. That is what defines us, not being part of these groups. Because the thing is, like, these groups can shift in a moment, right? As we've seen in the past, like political parties and all that kind of stuff, where everyone's like, oh, so passionate about what's going on, and then they change something. Just like, hey, that doesn't go with my values. That is no longer part of what I believe in, but I'm so invested in being part of this group. Well, it creates that cognitive dissonance, and we have this issue here. We need to sort of like address these things before it goes too far. And I've copied something that I pasted. Sorry, I'm going to copy and paste something into the chat here that I put into it's pretty long, but it pretty much sums up what I just said. And I think if we start to try to get people to understand that we need to define ourselves by who we are as individuals and not the groups that we are part of, we can start getting that separation between, groups that can radicalize people and make that distinction between the self and others. Probably a good place to start. But we really need to look into these things because, if we want to shove it under the rug, which is, like I said, what a lot of people have been saying on social media is don't even pay any attention to it. And I'm like, well, no, like you're not going to find out what the problems are and how to prevent it in the future if you don't analyze it and do something about it.
Yeah, I mean, on one level, I'm kind of wondering why nobody ever handed the dude a piss jug or something. I mean, it's kind of absurd. He's just gonna sit there and like literally like piss himself playing video games or like just okay. But like this brings something else to mind too, right? Like whenever people have like these like violent outbursts or whatever, or like these incredibly like extreme views on things, like it doesn't really, sometimes like it just feels like it doesn't even really matter like how much you're trying to to like work with them or to like try to like like understand, like give them that sounding board and like like let them realize like how this isn't really a good idea. I mean, like most of the times, like think about whenever we interact with people that are like what I describe as like zealots or extremists, and even like when you're trying to like kind of find some kind of like middle ground and you're trying to relate to people and they're just like, well, you're a demon, like you know what I'm saying? I mean, like, okay, I mean, like you're completely free to think that, but what do you do when it goes from, well, you're a demon to it's now like my mission on this earth to go and eradicate all demons? Like,
Mm-hmm.
because for whatever reason, like God told me that if I wanted to be, like taken to the promised land, like I have to go and get rid of all you motherfuckers and I have to clean this planet up. And it's like, okay, obviously something's been lost in translation here, or like you can't really be rational or communicate well with someone that isn't rational or trying to communicate with you. Like we've seen this. Like you saw this, like what, like a week or so ago, right? When you try to have a discussion about something that you feel like is basically just political garbage to push an agenda, and you can't even have the conversation without people going, fuck you, you're a toxic masculine, blah blah blah. It's like people like you are ruining the world. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
no. And I mean, you can spend like a whole week trying to like share your perspective and point out that like what you're picking up is not anything like what I actually put down. Like you didn't bother to actually listen to what I'm saying or like understand anything about like my views or my perspective. Like you're literally living in a world of illusions that all of your assumptions and projections that you put onto other people created. And like at that point, does it even really, I mean, like I don't want to sound like defeatist here, but like, you can't make someone else like see things the way that you want to see them. You can't make someone else not hate you. Yeah, it's rough. I mean, I think it would be good if we could figure out some kind of way to like prevent these things. But then, like to touch on what I was saying earlier, I think these things have gotten so out of hand now and so frequent that like honestly, I'll tell you like straight up, I don't believe they're all real. Like I definitely think something tragic happened. But I think like in some of these cases, the media like runs with it. They blow these things way out of proportion and they push an agenda. I'm not saying that's what happened in this situation, but I'm saying like in other situations, like ain't nobody live stream them, and there's nobody finding all these bodies that they claim, got created. There's a lot of times there's just too many questions, but focusing on the not conspiracy side of things, like how do you relate to someone that refuses to see you as a human being and like even care?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, look, I think that in these kinds of scenarios, even though like you may not necessarily, get true to the person or the individual, it is still worth trying to have that conversation to the best of your ability. I mean, if it turns into like an absolute shit fight, where everyone's calling each other names and all that kind of thing, it's doesn't really go anywhere. But at the same time, like just the example in itself, is you can't just stop trying, is what I'm saying. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if we're going to give up, then we may as well all give up on everything. But just even the discussion itself can serve as an example for somebody who's coming along these situations and look at these things and go, okay, well, these things don't exist. Well, apparently they do. And apparently it is difficult to talk about these situations, but that's the whole point of why we're doing it, right? I mean, like we get together every week, and it's not just us. There's plenty of other people around the world that are doing the same thing. get together and try to talk and discuss these things that are difficult to talk about, difficult to dissect and pull apart. But the point of it is to try and grow, to sort of like learn something, to try and evolve, to understand and move past whatever it is that we're in at the moment. And I think if we try and maintain that position, and continue trying to do the same thing, then it's not for it's not all for nothing, I don't think. And even in the example, that you were saying, like myself getting into that situation a week ago or so, there were still things that emerged from that were revelations even to myself. Like as much as I thought that stuff existed, I didn't think it was to that level, and I didn't think it was going to be like that way. But that's the way that it panned out. And like I said, for me, it was a revelation in itself. Like, there was bits and pieces that happened in there. I was just like, wow, okay, no worries. Like, I understand more now. Like, I do understand a hell of a lot more now than what I did before. But I think that in itself is worthwhile. It's there, and anybody else that comes along and reads it, even like, oh, it's blockchain, it's going to be there forever. Okay, good. Right? Anybody that comes along it, years from now, they're going to look back on it and go like, wow, that was interesting. And hopefully by that time, this kind of bullshit has gone away, and we're no longer having to deal with these things. Maybe we're going to have different problems by that time. But at least we can look back on it and go like, okay, well, it happened. That's how it was, and hopefully it's better by the time people look back on it.
Yeah, I guess that's really all we can do in these situations is hope that in some kind of way we can create some kind of net positive outcome out of like the worst situations, right? And to touch on what Toriko's saying here, like on some level, I would say, yeah, like humanity, especially online, we struggle with communication. I think part of the modern world we live in and the way like our society has moved to electronic communication for a lot of things doesn't really help. But ultimately, I think like the point that I was trying to make is you cannot communicate with someone that is not receptive to what you're saying, right? Like if someone's not trying to understand what you're saying and like they're just looking for points to argue with you on, and you can't communicate with someone that doesn't want to communicate with you. Like it doesn't work. Like what happens is you talk at them and then they talk at you. You can't make someone listen. And oftentimes like it actually makes the situation worse from what I've seen, because like they're not listening to you and they feel like you're not listening to them, so it just continues to escalate. Like at some point, like I'm perfectly fine just being like, look, this conversation's going nowhere. We obviously don't communicate well, and like that's it. Like I'm not gonna carry this on, because that's all it does is it like just breeds animosity and hatred and vitriol towards each other. Like it's the most frustrating thing in the world to sit there and like keep talking at someone and like all they're doing is talking back at you, and there's literally like no communication, because like even if like they heard something you said, it's just like looking for a point to attack you on. Like it's not like listening for any kind of like comprehension or understanding. It's listening to try to take something you said out of context and then throw it back in your face, Like if I say like I want to have a conversation about, like shit, I can't. I'm like kind of like drawing a blank exactly what that topic was about, but basically like part of the conversation was bringing up examples to show you that like clearly somewhere in society this example exists, and this is like proof that it does exist. Then like if we can't reach some kind of like understanding or concession on that point, and like your whole line of response is to attack me for even pointing out that something exists, Like that's not communication. That's what I'm trying to say. It's not like really a question of better communication. It's a question of any communication in my mind.
Mm. But how do we get beyond that? That's the thing, because these situations do occur. They will continue to occur. Um, but the long and short is, whatever the facts and the data of the situation, they will still continue to exist regardless of whether we want to look at the data or not, whether we want to agree that it exists or not, or anything of the sort. So and this is why I say, like what's the answer really? Like, oh, are we supposed to just bury it, sweep it under the rug, not worry about it, and let it occur again and again and again until people get hurt? Because and again, going back to like the whole shooting scenario here, yeah, the person who committed this crime, this horrible act, um, they feel that somebody somewhere had wronged them, um, and this was the payback. But the people that were hit with this were the innocents, and this is kind of like what I was like way back when I was saying this before. Is you've got the two factions rise, you've got the big bad wolves on both sides, and they're pointing the fingers at each other, and they're bad people, blah blah blah, blah etc. But it's the people that are innocent, the people in the middle, the people that are not radical extremists, the ones that are looking to hurt people. They're the ones that get hurt, and this is what I'm saying. Like, how can we bring this together so like it doesn't happen?
Um, I'm gonna say in some situations you can't. Like I think we get into part of the just like the nature of relativity, right? Like these things exist in contrast to each other, and that's the way the universe exists, right? You can't have positive without negative. It would just be neutral. You can't have good without bad. You can't have peace without war. You can't have love without fear. Like it doesn't work. Uh, I mean, I think like in from my perspective, that's the best that I can really like draw from these situations. Is like I can appreciate that the contrast has to exist because without knowing just like how horrible things can be, we wouldn't know just how good things can be, right?
That's true. That's true. Yeah, can't appreciate the day without the night, and vice versa. Um, but yeah, looking at it, the long and short is that there needs to be some kind of understanding for that communication to occur. And like I said, for these situations, like how can we even get that to happen? It seems impossible. And is the answer to just stop talking about it completely? So we should stop talking about these things and sweep it under the rug and never discuss it ever again, and just allow it to continue to happen. The next radical groups rise, whether, like I said, whether it's the political sphere, radicals in race, and all that kind of stuff, doesn't matter, right? So we just allow that to keep happening, or like that's what I'm saying. Like, um, how can we tackle this if we can't even talk about it? Because, like I said, realistically, it's the innocents that are in the middle that are getting hurt, right? Like the radicals have their thoughts, their beliefs. They attack, and like I said, like this attack was planned well enough. So then, they're not attacking people who are armed. Like this person wasn't going to go to a military base with his 4 weapons, and he wouldn't have taken down shit. Wouldn't have done nothing. The whole point of the fact was that he was going there with the intent of attacking people who are unarmed, who were in a position like where their mental state was that they believed that they were going to be safe, they weren't going to be harmed, they were trying to communicate with God, or whatever it is that that they're doing, is not thinking about this shit. And this is what I mean. The innocents are the ones that are getting hurt. The innocents are the ones that are that are taking the brunt of the hit when the radicals attack. That's the long and short of it. But if we can't discuss these things, then essentially we're just going, okay, well, it goes in the too hard basket, and we're just not going to bother dealing with it, and it's going to happen again and again and again. Because let me just be 100% clear that when these things happen, there are minorities within the groups that are going to turn around and go like, oh, well, they did that to us. Now we've got to do that to them. Then that happens. Then the group that was attacked then goes, well, they've done that to us. We've got to do this to them. And it continues again and again. It just continues to perpetuate the cycle.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying we shouldn't talk about it. I guess this is going to sound kind of nihilistic, right? Um, I guess, like, if we really boil it down, I'm saying, like, I don't think it matters if we do or don't, right? And the reason I say that is I feel like there's always going to be some people that are inclined to talk about it, right? I mean, like, hell, we're talking about it right now. Um, I think there's going to always be some people that are inclined to just, you know, live in denial or pretend it doesn't happen. But I can tell you what I see comes out a lot of these situations is it. The more we talk about it, the more it. I guess depending on the narrative, you know, like I'm trying to avoid that narrative, but I think like what happens is whenever we get into a certain narrative when we're talking about these things, and like we get so caught up on trying to like prevent, you know, like the next thing, what happens is this leads to further ways that we restrict ourselves and our freedom out of fear, you know? Like, look at the US, for example, right? Like, after 9/11, we get the Patriot Act passed. One, great branding, you know, like I'll tip my hat to that. Like, these motherfuckers had the perfect name to slap on this horrible law. But they get this legislation passed that gives them full right to basically spy on all the citizens, detain people without, you know, like having to actually notify their families. They don't even have to put you on trial. They can just hold you indefinitely and never tell anybody why. And the U.S. citizens passed this out of fear because after 9/11, it got talked about and talked about and talked about until everyone's afraid that we're going to get attacked again, right? And then they keep talking until, oh no, now we've got to go invade the Middle East and we got to go find them where they live before they get us. And, you know, I can't tell you what's right or wrong in this situation because ultimately it's all just a matter of perspective, right? But I think what happens is whenever we let certain people, mainly like the mainstream media, the governments control the narrative, what happens is it's always in their benefit, right? Like it doesn't necessarily benefit the people. Like I don't think enabling the government to do mass surveillance of the population and to detain people indefinitely without any reason is any way that I want to live. You know, like I don't think that perpetuates freedom. And I think that's just saying trade the devil you don't know for the devil you do know. You know, like it's like saying like here evil's gonna exist. Which flavor do you prefer? And you know, like personally, I'd rather not have to submit myself to either one. And then I think that's when we get into the mindset of wanting to just kind of like remove ourselves from society and like, you know, go live off grid and, you know,
Well,
basically like I guess hope like hell nobody ever finds our house. But you know, I mean, I'm not saying we shouldn't talk about it. I'm just saying I don't think talking about it necessarily leads to the solutions we're looking for, at least not in my experience.
hmm Look, I'll definitely agree with you there. The thing that is a great motivator of mankind has always been fear. You know, if you can strike fear into the heart of people, you can get them to pretty much do anything. As we've seen time and time again, you know, you can pass laws, you can have control of people, you put people in a high vis vest, and you know, people do anything that they tell them to, essentially. Um, but this also lands on things like you know, the media manipulation. Again, something we were talking about in the last groups we were looking at, where essentially the media comes along and fans the flames, and not because, you know, of that they've got some idea of what the grand scheme of things is, some big conspiracy, and the media is in on it, and they know what the government knows. No, 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 no. Of course not. Much simpler goals set out than that, and that is to make money. They want people to sort of like click the links to buy the papers and all that kind of thing, and they sit there and they just fan the flames on and on, and all it does is exacerbate the situation and just make things worse essentially. And but it plays directly into what the government wants and what the government needs, and that is control. Because the more that they scare us into believing things, the more control they can have over us. Because they'll turn around and, like you were saying, like, oh, it's a threat of terror. Therefore, we have to make sure that you take your shoes off, you get scanned, when you go through the airports, blah 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 blah, all that kind of stuff. It just creates more control. Oh, now we need to monitor everybody's phone calls and everyone's text messages and everyone's emails because of terror, right? Again and again. And like I said, the thing is with the NZ Prime Minister essentially just turned around and said, "Yeah, well, we're going to reform the gun laws straight away." And like I said, not that I'm fighting either way for the gun laws. I don't really care, to be honest. But it is something that has been a repercussion, like a direct repercussion. Like they will be reviewing the gun laws, just simple as that. And they've also likened it to the Port Arthur massacre. And of course, there's the conspiracy theories and everything that goes with that as well. But we're not delving into those. But it's just something to throw onto the plate as a point of understanding that fear is a great motivator. So it is used as a tool to get us to do things, from this higher level stuff where it's like right in your face, even just to like basic advertising to get you to buy things that uses the same principles of using fear to motivate people to do things. But if we have the understanding, and this is what I'm getting at, like if we talk about it and we have the understanding, okay, this is how it works, this is how it operates, and again, like part of it is acknowledging the fact that we're all human beings. We all have these flaws. None of us are floating above the other because we have this knowledge. The only thing that it does is it gives us that little bit of an edge. So when we do experience it ourselves, when we are there ourselves and we have to make decisions, we can go like, oh, okay, hold on. This sounds like something that I heard on that radio show that one time where they were talking about social identity theory and manipulating the masses and media coverage and all that kind of stuff. And you start thinking about it. All you need is just that one little nugget of knowledge that can tip the scales, and you just step back and go, yeah, I'm not interested in any of this shit, because I can see what's happening. You can see the strings on the puppets, and you get yourself woke.
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately, we all have to do what we feel like we need to do to, respond to these situations, or to, like find peace in our lives after these situations, right? Like, I think on some level we're all affected when something like this happens. Like, some of us to obviously like a much more greater extent than others, but, it's kind of like to the point where I guess like the best way I could put it is like I'm almost just like numb to these things at this point, right? Because throughout my life, like it's just been constantly escalating and escalating and escalating, and I feel like we're at this point now where if I turn on the mainstream news, like I'm expecting to hear about a tragedy. I mean, it's kind of like ridiculous that we live in a world that I feel like I don't. One, like I just don't watch the news because I don't trust any of it, and I think it's all like got incredible bias, and there's agenda. I mean, in the U.S., like we literally have a government run and funded mainstream media. Like it's been that way for the last 70, 80 years now. It's crazy. Like they basically get their whole networks paid for, but they have to like guarantee that the primetime news fits the agenda. And I think it's kind of like absurd that most people like don't even know this at this point. But it's almost like whenever something like this happens, they're gonna talk about it and talk about it and talk about it. it kind of like reminds me of like seasons of a television show, right? Like right now, we just started the new season of New Zealand Massacre. So for the next like maybe like a month, we're going to be hearing about news about this event, and like we're going to be talking about it, getting updates about it. They're going to have all the experts come in to like tell us what we should be thinking, blah blah blah. And then, like once everybody gets tired of that season, we're gonna move on to the next season of, like whatever the new tragedy is, because there's gonna be a new one. Like it's just the world we live in. We can't have peace. People have to live in fear. So I can tell you, like once I stopped following the mainstream news and like keeping up with all these things, my quality of life increased drastically. I don't sit there and like I don't like sit there and like think about this stuff all day long anymore. You know, right or wrong, I can't really tell you, right? Like I'm not unsympathetic. Like I don't want things like this happening, but at the same time, I'm not gonna spend my entire life afraid that I'm going to be the victim of a terror attack, or like something insane like this is going to happen to me. And I feel like whenever they keep these things like perpetuated in the media for like months on end, like what happens is like they're essentially like pushing people to live in fear, right? Like they want people that literally just go to work, come home, go to work, come home, push their consumerism bullshit. Like they want you living in debt. They they don't want you just to like be free and live your life. Like that doesn't benefit the system, right? And
That's it.
I think like that's a decision that we all have to make for ourselves. We all have to get to that point. But as far as I'm concerned, like if I never hear about another tragedy again, like it's not gonna bother me. And
Mm.
I'm not saying that because like I'm a heartless asshole and I don't care. I'm saying I I don't want to live my life like that. You know what I'm saying?
Mm. No, totally with you, totally with you. And look, I'm the same. Like I feel the same. But the point where I'm coming from is essentially, yeah. And I think I wrote something a little while back in regards to like what I do and why I do this kind of thing. Um, and essentially, what it comes down to is, yeah, I think part of peeps becoming more woke, just in general, is having the ability to decipher the bullshit when it happens. And for me, when I see these things, like and if you have a look through like my blog, you'll see just like random odds and ends. But like I pulled apart a construct between paramedics and HR officers and those two groups when they were feuding and that kind of thing, and stripping it apart so we can understand the self. Because if we can understand ourselves, then we can sort of like have a decent front when these things happen. Because I guarantee you, there's going to be people out there that go through particular emotions and feelings when they have this information given to them. I mean, like this time around, what we're talking about here is the terror attack that happened in New Zealand. But tomorrow it could be something else. Next week it'll be something else, and again and again. But if we don't have the tools necessary to dissect these things and actually understand the manipulation that's being put in front of us, then we're liable to fall for it. And this is why I try and pull these things apart and deconstruct them. It's not because I'm trying to, I want to say something controversial and look at me, I'm top notch. Like, no, I'm taking these things because they are points of high emotion. They breed radicalism and hatred and these kinds of things. But I'm trying to put these things in this context and say, okay, I understand that there's all this stuff's going on here, but take all of the emotional bullshit out of it and really look what's going on here, right? That's what I'm saying, like the media fanning the flames, these kinds of things, etc., etc. So if we take that governing factor, and I might have to write something about governing factors, but essentially, if we take that governing factor, which is applicable in all of the areas that we've discussed, like I said, from race, politics, sexes, the works, just you name it, where there's groups, like two or more groups, this is applicable. The social identity theory, these kinds of things, if we understand these things, then when they happen and they occur, instead of just falling straight into their plan, like into the agenda, and going like, oh my god, falling straight into it, we take that step back, we question it, we utilize these things that we're learning during these discussions. People are learning stuff all the time. People in the chat space are bringing things to add for us to discuss. We dissect these things, we understand them, and the more that we do so in here, the more we can do so out there in the real world when it happens to us. And it also allows us to be able to separate ourselves from the rubbish, because, like I said, the amount of people that are woke are pretty small, right? They're growing in numbers, but they're pretty small. But I think that we're doing our part by helping the understanding. When we pull these things apart and we discuss them and dissect them. So, like I said, that's why I believe it's not an effort in futility to do so, and why I continue to do so and will continue to do so as long as I feel I want to do it. And as hard as some of the things may be to discuss, I think that we need to sort of like keep keeping on to get through it, and hopefully, eventually, we'll be able to sort of like shake the chains that are sort of like binding us. That being government, social structures, and that kind of thing, and be able to think for ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, I can agree with that. I think that's part of like the biggest thing that I think a lot of people miss is that the way the media talks about these things actually perpetuates and incites future events, right? Like whenever you're perpetually talking about, for example, in the U.S., right? Like where I live, there's always an unarmed black man being shot by the cops. Like this is a perpetual narrative. It will never go away. Like they've been doing it for years now. I'm not saying this is every day, but it's like every time it happens, it's going to get talked about until the next one happens. And whenever too many happen in a row, we're going to have race riots. And look, like I'm not saying we shouldn't have like the media covering when something like this happens. I mean, obviously we shouldn't have unarmed people being shot, like regardless of race. But like whenever these things do happen, the media is all over it, and the words that they use are so like incendiary. Like they're trying to like fan those flames. They're trying to push the separatist like agenda. They're trying to get the black versus white narrative going. Just like whenever, like one of the other issues where they're trying to push men versus women, they're always trying to divide people and keep them separated. And I think like once we can see that, that's whenever we break it up. But it sounds like good Sir Swoopington here is getting a little stale of our conversation. I don't know. Anybody got some other topics you guys want us to discuss this evening? we could jump back into discussing Krem's hate group that she that she organized. Yeah, I'm totally joking, but it looks like Azaria would like to discuss cats. Are you gonna come discuss the philosophy of cats with us, Azaria?
Kitties.
Okay, so Azaria is gonna come discuss the philosophy of cats with us.
All in the native tongue of the cats. That is meows.
Hello, Azaria. So what is the philosophy of the feline?
Why do I always get drug on the air? Oh, hold on. I gotta tell Shane, seriously, they just drug me on the air. He was like, every time I type in the chat, the philosophy, there you go. Julia has it right there. Fuck this. Fuck that thing in particular. That's the philosophy. And you drugged me, yes.
Well, obviously it's because we all love Azaria and we all need Azaria on every show.
Right. Oh, I love you. Hello.
Hi.
What are we talking about? We're going to change subjects?
Yeah, I think
Kid.
we're gonna get away from the you know, like I guess ultimately we kind of spent more time on it than like I cared to, and I'm not saying like we shouldn't talk about these things. I feel like the way that like the media like perpetuates this shit, it's just like an endless cycle of fear to push government agendas and to keep people just worried all the time and
Yeah.
scared of each other. But
Hmm.
so
That's it.
so
If we don't point it out, how are people going to know that it's happening? As in, like the division, not the actual events themselves.
for sure.
Right. Right. I mean, it's true. And I don't even know there's nothing we can do about it except just be aware of it.
So what's going on with you, Azaria?
Oh, shit. That's pretty much it.
So you're like a modern day Diogenes over there.
Oh, what?
Oh man. So you know what? Like let's have like an actual like a little philosophy story. Diogenes is one of like the grandfathers or like one of the ancient like Stoic philosophers, right? He basically like lived his whole life like intentionally as like a homeless person, and he was like actually born into he was born into wealth. His like father was a banker. From what people understand, like he was actually somewhat successful at this, and he kind of like hit that point where he realized like fuck this game, like I don't want to do this anymore. Like apparently like, they caught him defacing currency, things like that, and he just like he was like exiled. He like left his like privileged life, and he was just like done with that. So then he ends up on the street, and he would like often be seen like naked, and he like lived in a giant like one of those giant like clay pots, like that was like his little house. And he would like go around like basically telling people how much like nothing they did mattered, and how basically like whenever they would like run around like freaking out about stuff, like he would just tell them like how insane it was. But this is one of the oldest Stoic philosophers. So like one time when one of these guys called him a dog, like because that was like an insult back in the day, he proceeded to pee on their leg.
Wow. Well,
Yeah.
damn. Well,
Also, dog
yes.
is also still in play as a bad word in Australia. If you call particularly Hausos and Bogans, if you call them a dog, it's the worst thing you can do. They will beat your ass if you call them a dog. Just saying.
Dog?
Yeah, Australia, mate, Australia.
Well, when I was in college, my first year, I took philosophy, and my philosophy teacher asked if I had considered majoring in philosophy. And I said, "Oh, that's ridiculous. Who majors in philosophy? What am I ever going to do with that degree?" So instead, I got a liberal arts degree, which is equally as useless. But the point is that apparently at one point I was good at philosophy. Now I'm not.
Yeah. Man, like I can't even like imagine like actually going to college to get a philosophy degree. I think like at some point like the question would arise of what do you do, like business wise with a philosophy degree.
Yeah, teach. That's all you could do is teach, right? What else?
Well, it's interesting because like I think it's something that we have like honestly kind of like lost, especially like in the U.S. education system, and I think philosophy is something that should definitely be taught. Like at least throughout grade school, kind of like I think like a lot of topics should be taught that just aren't. But
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think psychology and philosophy should be taught, and not just as some kind of elective that you might study when you're in college. What is sound waves? You're saying I don't agree with indifference. I don't know where did that come from.
No, he's probably talking about stoicism. Like it's funny because I find myself trying to not be stoic because I kind of like have an inclination to feel like that same way. Like if none of this has any point, then why bother doing it? But at the same time, like I think it's
Oh,
really
like
it's
like being a nihilist, you mean?
right. So basically, like you can look at it one of two ways, right? Like either there's no point in anything and none of it matters, or you could look at it as there's no point in anything, so you might as well just enjoy whatever you do. And like that's kind of like the approach that I take to nihilism, I guess you could say, or I don't really like look at it as like there's no point to anything, right? Like I look at it as, while ultimately it may all just be a wash, right? Like it's gonna all balance out in the end, etc. I kind of look at it as very like a freeing thing, like if good and bad are all perspective, and like my judgments of other people are all kind of like irrelevant, then I may as well just be whoever I want to be and not worry about other people and what they think of me.
Agrod says that there is no good or bad. Remember that? You know that video he always talks about?
Yeah, you know, good or bad is very much a perspective based thing. It's just like right and wrong. Like if you believe punching Shayna in the crunch basket is like a justifiable thing, then like in your mind it's right. But like if he believes it's wrong, he's gonna
Yeah.
he's gonna view whenever you do that as something wrong. But like it doesn't really matter because ultimately it's just how each of you view it.
Right. And I think that one video that he puts up, like the point of it, like, it has something like the farmer's crops went bad, and then he talked to someone, and the guy said, well, who's to say what's good or bad? Because the farmer was like, this is bad. And I think the point of the video is that sometimes what you think is a bad thing sends you down a path for it to be a good thing. So basically, you never know what's going to happen. And so try not to look at, a situation like, oh, this is labeling it bad, because it might lead to something good, right? And sure, that makes sense. But I can certainly think of situations where I can say, this is a bad thing. And it doesn't matter if it might end up turning out into something good. It's just bad. And I'm not going to be disgusting and say the most horrible thing that you can think of, but think of the most horrible thing you can think of that might happen to a human being, and tell me that something would happen to that human being, and have someone stand there and say, well, there is no good or bad. Who's to say what's good or bad? You know what I mean? So I don't get that philosophy.
Well, I think that also leans on something similar, where they say in religious terms, and again, not wanting to be rude against anyone who has religious beliefs, but they say that when something bad happens, they say, oh, it's all part of God's plan, right? And that's how they sort of like brush it aside. It's like it doesn't matter what it is, it's God's plan. Don't go against God, kind of thing. And it kind of like really minimizes the situation and the feelings and the emotion that the person has for whatever it is that's happening in their life.
Yeah, absolutely. It looks like the chat, there's talking about stoicism. What is that? What is happening?
Okay, so kind of like how nihilism takes like the nothing matters approach, stoicism is basically similar in some ways, but basically it's about recognizing that you really don't have control over like the world, over other people. Like if you ever heard the Serenity Prayer, it's kind of I say like the message that you get from the Serenity Prayer is kind of stoic. Accept the things that I cannot change, change the things I can, the wisdom to know the difference. Like for example, a stoic outlook on a toxic relationship, right? Well, like, so let's say if I'm in a toxic relationship and like I'm not happy and like my general approach had always been to try to change the other person and to try to like make it work, right? Like just keep like trying to make it work. Well, the stoic outlook on it would be I'm going to change what I can change, which is my own thoughts and actions, and I'm going to be, like happy with or without the other person. Like you could apply that to a job, right? Like, let's say my job makes me miserable. I hate doing it. The only reason I'm doing it is because I have to get money. Well, okay, so let's say I do actually need the money for whatever reason. Like I like the lifestyle that the money gives me. I don't want to figure out a way to get around that. So what I do know is I want the money and I'm going to continue to work and like have a job like that. So what can I change? Well, I can change where the money's coming from. I can go find another job. I can change how I go about getting money. I can change, like either the place that I work, the type of work I do. I could go independent, start working for myself. Stoicism is very much about self-empowerment. That'd be like about the best way that I could put it. Like if self-empowerment's the way you want to think about it, it's more just about accepting, I would say, like personal responsibility and like engaging yourself instead of like looking externally for the answers to your problems.
Yeah, that sounds like a great outlook on life.
I think part of that as well is like removing the emotional content, because a lot of the times we do end up spending a lot of time in our emotional jails, and we've put ourselves in these places as well. Like um, for some of these situations, like say you're talking about a job that you don't like and that kind of thing, and you don't like going there, you feel like crap, and it's all terrible things. But instead of actually doing like what Clay was saying, is like you've got these options, you can look at different things and try and change things. We sit there and sort of like dwell on it. We're like, oh, everything's so bad and my life sucks and nothing will ever change. And we put ourselves in our own jails. Um, and we refuse to leave there. And a lot of that has to do with our emotional attachment to these particular things. And I think moving forward from there is basically being able to put that emotional, sort of like the emotional self aside and go, okay, I'm not going to let that control me anymore. Now, what I'm going to do is find my way to gravitate towards what I want to find my autonomy, to find a more conscious self, a more congruent self, and that's part of the process, is being able to do that. So I put that aside and think more on the lines of sort of like the stats, the data, and that kind of stuff, and find our way through it, as opposed to keeping ourselves in our own jail.
Okay, here you go, Azaria. I just dropped like the simplest way that I could break down Stoicism. Do you have a problem? Yes, no. If yes, then don't. But do you have a problem in your life? Yes. Can you do anything about it? Yes, no. Don't worry about it. Do you have a problem in your life? No. Then don't worry about it. Basically, like the whole point that's trying to get across to you is that worrying actually doesn't do anything. Like it's basically like a self-perpetuating thing that
Yeah, this is the way that I want to be, and I am not. Now, how do I get to be that way? This is what I just said this to Shane again today. I don't know how to make my brain not worry. This is me. Do I have a problem in my life? Yes. Can I do something about it? No. And then I just worry. Do I have a problem in my life? No. Then will you be crazy and create a problem? Yes. I don't know. I don't know how to not worry and not have anxiety.
Well, I think, yeah, I mean, I know you said like you work on meditating and stuff, so like whenever you like meditate on some of these issues, just like think about it like logically, like whatever the problem is, right? Like let's say, do I want to go to work today? Yes or no? Yes. Okay, well, then problem solved. Go to work today. Do I want to go to work today? No. Okay, well, what are my options here? That's when you like break it down to, do I want the money? Yes, no. And you just kind of like work through it. But ultimately, there's no point in like worrying about it and creating stress for yourself, because like all it does is just make you unhappy. If you don't want to do the thing, then ultimately it's telling you, don't do the thing that you don't want to do. And if you feel that you have to do it, then, but what's the point of worrying about it? Just go get it over with.
I think practice is what'll get you there, Izzy. As someone who used to worry about quite a lot of things in the past, I used to sort of like struggle with that. I'd sort of like spend a lot of time in my bed trying to sleep, and apart from like the pain and that shit that I'm going through, a lot of the other side of it was me just sitting there thinking shit that's just like it doesn't make a difference, right? So I'm sitting there going like, oh, I'm in so much pain and my back hurts, and I don't know what's going to become of me. What like, how will I, get by in these kinds of things? And look, I'm not saying that there's no real concern to have, to think these things, because it's natural to think, what am I going to do with myself, kind of thing. But I found that at that particular time, it wasn't very productive, and it was basically stopping me from going to sleep and that kind of thing. And over years of practice, you just get better at it, to a point where like now I'm just like, I go to bed and these thoughts still come into my mind, because you're not going to stop the thoughts from happening. That's you in your existence. That's who you are. Like, you're going to think these things, but it's how much time you spend on it that changes. So I'll have like these thoughts come to me at night, and I'll be like, well, I've thought about it for the past 5 years. Am I going to really spend more time on it now? And I'll be like, yeah, well, I'll find something. And I just kind of like leave it at that, and the thought kind of like fades out. But it's taking years of practice. And trust me, I was like really bad at it for a long time. From when I started being told that, um, given sort of like tools to try and minimize these thought processes and that kind of thing. From grounding, have you heard of grounding, where the 5 things that you can see, you can smell, you can touch, that kind of thing, which didn't work for me, mind you, but I tried it. And like I said, over years of practice, you just get better at it, but it's not something that's going to be completely eliminated from your life.
Yeah, I just try to focus on not going down that spiral of negative thoughts. So, as soon as it happens, the worry or the negative thought, if it's unnecessary, I have to try to just like nip it right in the butt there, because if I don't, then I'll go into a downward spiral of depression.
Mm-hmm. Do you have things that you go to as far as like, like I mentioned, the grounding thing? Is there something that you go to in that sense, to sort of like, detach yourself from whatever thoughts that you're having?
It helps if I get up and do some yoga or walk outside or play some music.
Mm-hmm. So you've got like these interventions in place, so if they do get out of hand, you can do something about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the main things, and that's why I was saying, if you have like grounding or anything like that, there's a bunch of things that anyone in the audience that's interested, you can look them up, grounding techniques and that kind of thing, ways to sort of like get out of your own head, because all it takes is just one moment of getting out of it and being able to acknowledge the fact that it's happening, and then like you're right with it. But if you sit on it and you dwell on it, like what Izzy's saying, it can lead you down a dark path. You can spiral real quick, and it can turn sour. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. Whenever, like, I used to be I guess what you would call like a chronic overthinker. I'm talking like overthink things to the point that I would ruin all of my relationships. I would, just like never be happy. And my mind like never knew how to shut the fuck up. So like basically what happened is I would just be trying to get high and like numb myself out all the time. But it's funny because like whenever I got sober, I had to spend I want to say there was like a 2 to 3 month period where like I did pretty much nothing other than write and like work through these problems that were coming out of my head. Or every time they would pop up, I would like follow it to its logical conclusion, Like every time I would worry about something I don't know, like like let's say for relationships or whatever, for example, you know how there's like so many thoughts that like come to mind, like I wonder what they're doing right now. And it's like, well, I have no way to know that, so what does it matter? It's like accepting that I don't have control over that, and it's not like up to me to, like be that worried about someone else's life, like no matter what. Like I have to focus on my own life. So, like I would kind of like address it like that and remind myself that it's not up to me. I don't have control over that and I don't need to worry about it. And then, like something else would come up later. Well, what happens if, like we got into this argument and then they go get with somebody else? Well, I have no control over that, right? So what does it really matter? They're going to ultimately do whatever they want to do. And if they don't want to be with me, then, who cares, right? Because, like, I don't have any control over that, and I don't want somebody to be with me that doesn't want to be with me. So then, like, later another thought will come up, well, what happens if they do come back? And then I'm sitting there like, I can go jump down like 30 different wormholes, or I can say, I don't know what happens if that happens, but what I can do is worry about it when or if it happens, Like basically all of these like unknown what ifs that we like run through our mind constantly, it's ultimately just pointless, right? Like we can entertain them if we want to, and we can like play the fantasies out, and we can build up all of our assumptions and expectations, and we can play that game. But if it like never makes us happy, and all it does is like lead us into a constant cycle of worrying, and like if it's not making us happy, then what's the point?
Yeah. Well, realistically, like that overthinking is us going, well, attempting to try and go through all of the variables that could ever happen, and trying to pick the ones that so like are most likely to happen, and then try and choose our reaction to those things. And that's the whole thing of overthinking. We're sitting there trying to go through the scenarios and that kind of thing. And I think that knowing yourself is a good way of getting through these things as well. I found that the more that I found out about myself, because I've been going through like a learning process over the, well, my whole life, but more over the past few years, a bit more than usual. And in the past, it was because I wasn't sure of myself. I'm like, oh, I don't know, like kind of thing. And it's kind of like where I was at. Whereas like now, I'm just like, well, if someone cheats on me, right? Well, I'm not taking it. Simple, right? That's it, finished. Whereas in the past, I was like, yeah, but we've been together for so long, and we've done these things together, and there was all of these variables that came in. But once I actually defined who I was, and I knew who I was as an individual, these decisions became a lot easier for me to make. So as these ideas come into my head of like what's going to happen, the variables didn't play as much of a part in the decision making. It was like, well, I do tolerate this, I don't tolerate that. I like this, I don't like that. This is what I want to do, this is what I don't want to do. And basically, if it fell into that realm of decision making, it was dealt with very quickly. So I think, like what you're doing, Izzy, with meditation, that kind of thing, is also good in the sense of you start defining yourself and feeling yourself and knowing yourself better. And these decisions that seem like so huge, and these thoughts that come through, become minimized a lot quicker in your own mind once you like know who you are better, I think.
Yeah. Yep. It's tough for me to once I get down into that vortex of despair. It's so hard for me to get back out of that. So I got to try my best not to get there.
Yeah, that's it. I think that like the peak of like my experience was like, I thought I was having a heart attack at one point, but I was actually just having a panic attack.
Oh yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
and fortunately for me, I just covered it in my modules in psych. And while when it first started happening, I thought, "Holy shit, I'm having a heart attack!" Because like my heart was going fast and I was short of breath and everything. But like I dissected it on the spot. I'm just like, okay, I'm not having the telltale, like the left arm thing, the taste of metal in the mouth. That like I deciphered it. And I said, "Holy shit, I'm having a panic attack! Like I'm literally going through a panic attack." And I'd never been through one before. And I was actually at the front of my house. I was having a cigarette. That's back when I was smoking. No, I don't smoke anymore. And yeah, I tried the grounding techniques, like I was saying, like the 5 things you can see, etc. And it wasn't doing shit. And I ended up just looking up at the stars, and just looking at the stars calmed me down. I was like, I don't know what it was, but that's what it was. And I think that's part of it, is finding the things that ground you. And if you can look up these things, and you've got the processes and all that kind of stuff, try them out. If they work, great. If not, then you can just keep searching until you find something as simple as, like I said, for me, is looking at the stars. Unfortunately, when panic attacks happen through the day, I don't have that the stars to look at. But you find other things, like you said, going for a walk, that kind of thing. So, sorry.
No, I agree with you. The panic attack thing. Oh man.
Mm-hmm.
Whew, that's a rough one. And I was going through a phase where I was getting so many, so I started to read some books and on how to deal with them. And one of the things that I found was to kind of, it was so hard for me to grasp this concept, so I don't even know if I can really get it across the right way. But instead of being afraid of the panic attack, to just kind of accept it, to kind of flow into it instead of resisting it. Because the resistance of it and the fear of it, it makes it worse, rather than being like, okay, I know exactly what's happening right now. I know that the adrenaline is rushing through my body. I know why this is happening. And this is just what's happening right now. And then that way you don't psych yourself out more and make it worse. Because what I tend to do when it happens is that I automatically go to, oh my God, I'm dying, which I think most people go to because it feels like you're freaking dying. So it's hard not to feel like you're dying when you're having one, though.
Yeah, definitely with you on that. And yeah, it definitely feeds it as well. So like, because you're having the panic attack and you're losing control, and then it's kind of like you try and control it. Like, well, at least I was trying to control. It's like, I have to get control of my body. I'm shaking and all these things are happening. Yeah, and I'm trying to get more control. And the more that I'm trying to get control, the more I'm losing control. It's kind of like death wobbles, like when you're on a skateboard or on a bike. Like you start wobbling and you try getting control, but the more that you try and get control, the bigger the wobbles get until you fall.
Yeah.
And then I got to a point where I was with these panic attacks where, like I've said before, like these things happen for a reason. Like the depression, anxiety, panic attacks, all of these things, they don't just happen to just randomly fall out of the sky and you have these experiences. No, there is a reason for them. And once I started looking at it from that perspective, I started delving into it and dissecting it and really starting to get into it. And it's like, what is it that I'm anxious about that's causing an anxiety attack? And being able to understand where these the emotions that were feeding the panic attack were coming from, I was able to start trying to take steps to rectify whatever was wrong in those sections of my life, and I found that reduced the panic attacks to a point where I don't really have panic attacks anymore. I do get anxiety, but like not panic attacks anymore. So worked.
Yeah, that's good. Knock on wood, I haven't had one in a long time. I still get anxiety, but yeah, once I start to, it's the same thing with the negative thought patterns. Like I have to try to like right away have awareness of it before it cycles into the very bad thing.
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like I only ever had one real, I guess you would say like panic attack. Kind of like what Cope's describing. Like I thought I was having a heart attack. Like I really, I was like convinced. Like okay, like something is wrong to the point that I'm probably about to die. Like I actually wrote about it. I wrote about like my near death experiences, and all I can say is like basically whenever I came out of that, it's like I somehow like I had gotten over the fear of dying. Like it doesn't scare me anymore, and I don't know like how to like get anybody else to that point. And I'm not saying like you should go around just being like, "Ooh, I could die today," but it's one of those things that we have no control over, right? And I feel like once like, you really embrace the fact that like we can't control the universe, we can't control other people, like we can't control when we live and die. Like there's just some things that no matter what we do, no matter how well we plan, no matter how hard we try, no matter how much money we throw at it, like there's just some things that you're never gonna have any control over, right? Like like really rich people that pay for like all the best health care, like they do everything, they live their life perfect, blah blah blah. They can still just drop dead of a heart attack or a brain aneurysm or something like that tomorrow, right? Like ultimately, I feel like once we get to that point that we can accept that we just don't have control over all of these things, there's just like no point in worrying about something like that to me anymore. I know like whenever you're in the moment, like obviously it's kind of hard to not be like, ooh shit, like I'm dying right now, right? But it's almost like there's like a like a mindset shift, and it's like it goes from like, oh my god, I'm dying right now, to being like, I could be dying right now. Like it's. Have you ever seen Daria? Like to me, it's almost like how Daria is just always like so blasé about everything.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
People used to call me Daria.
Wow. Yeah, but ultimately, I feel like if you get to that point where you're just like you can accept that you're never gonna have any control over when you die, like that takes like so much of the burden off of life. Like it's interesting because like I never thought I was afraid to die. Like I never even had like considered it because like I think like I was so like in a place where like I wouldn't even really entertain the thought, or like I didn't even think it could happen, you know, that like to me it wasn't like a realistic thing. So whenever whenever I was like having like that panic attack or whatever, it I think like it made me like really face it and like really kind of like understand that like I'm a mortal being, and at some point this is gonna be over. And then that led me to all the other thoughts, right? Like like what happens when we die, blah blah blah. Because like I had already rejected religion at that point, so like I just pretty much believed in nothingness. But I guess you could say like something just never felt like 100% right with me about that. And like the more I've learned and like the more I've explored my own thoughts and everything, I kind of got into what I view as like energetic existence, and I don't really view consciousness as like a biological thing. Like I view consciousness as energy. So like ultimately, it's led me to a place where I worry a lot less about anything that happens in this life, and I'm just kind of just like enjoy the ride. I'm gonna see where this goes, and whenever it's over, we'll figure out the next part from there.
Yeah, because you know what? When you think about dying, the way I look at it, there's a couple options. Well, maybe there's more, whatever. But so there's either something that happens and you have some sort of awareness after, which I can't really comprehend that, or your energy is just recycled. At that point, you would have no awareness, or absolutely nothing happens and you have no awareness. So then at that point, if you're afraid of dying, that's all just like in this existence. None of that's going to matter when you die, because when you die, you're dead and you're not even going to be aware of it anyway. So in a way, that's very freeing when you think about it.
Well, with human nature, it's we fear what we don't understand, and from what I understand, at least anyway, is we've been trying to figure that out for a long time, whether it's like religion or anything else. And there's the question of what happens after we die, and no one really has an answer, even those that have sort of like had near-death experiences, and I'm talking being dead for X amount of time and then coming back. The answers that they have don't really set anything in stone in regards to what's going on, except for, the whole light at the end of the tunnel thing, which seems to be relatively common, but not everyone sees that either. So it's kind of like, well, what does happen, right? Who knows? And for me, that was a scary thing. Is like, who knows what happens? It's like it's one of those anxiety things. It's like you're trying to think about something and trying to think of all the variables. It goes back to the anxiety thing we were talking about before. And I was really scared of it. Like for a long time, I was scared of death and that kind of thing, and other bits and pieces as well. Like not so much like supernatural stuff, as in like ooh crazy, but just like not being able to see things, like being like, and not of the dark itself, but like there could be something there that I don't know that's there, right? That's scary to me. Well, it was scary to me. But something that I can say is after, because I'd had near-death experiences as well, and that didn't really sort of like fix anything up either. I was still scared. But after the psychedelic experience, going through that and coming back, I came back and I'm just like, yep, job done. Yeah, all good. If I die, I know what's there. Well, I know enough of what's there. And I'm not scared of it anymore. I'm just like, yeah, that's fine. Same as like what was in the dark kind of thing, right? Because the whole thing is like, there could be something in the dark that could kill you and then you die. Whereas like now, because I've accepted death for what it is, I'm kind of like, well, I don't care what's in the dark, because if I do die, so what? I'm cool with it. It's fine. Not that I'm seeking death, but I'm fine with it. And yeah, like I think that's what Clay was getting at before, is like acceptance of the situation changes a lot of things.
Yeah, it's kind of like no matter what happens after death, it's either going to be an experience or it's not going to be an experience, right? And
Right.
like nothingness is not an experience, so it's nothing to worry about. The unknown is something that we have to live with every day, right? So not knowing whatever the experience would be is just another unknown. But what is known is that at some point this ride ends, So it's like if we can accept that and we can make peace with it, and we know that like the time we spend in this plane, this realm, whatever you want to call it, is finite, then going from there, the rest is easy, right? Like the rest is just whatever we do between now and then. And I mean, I think we play a lot of stupid games where we end up doing things that we don't want to do, and we waste the only resource that is really finite to us, which is our time in this experience. And I would much rather spend my time that I have in this experience doing things that I want to do, and living a life that like I want and that I agree with, than trying to do things that don't make me happy and that I don't want to be doing, just to like keep doing things that I don't want to do. And you know, I mean, I think we all have to kind of like figure out what is and isn't right for us. But you know, like once we do, if we're not worried about the fact that it's going to end one day, then there's nothing left to do but just be happy and just go with the flow.
Mm. This is why I kind of like take issue with people that are kind of like they think that their perspective is the perspective and that's it, and it's kind of like everyone needs to do it. Yeah, it's like, yeah, you just go there, you make money, you put paper in the bank, you get Lambos, Ferraris, you do this, you have some coke, job done, man. Like, why don't you want to make $1 million? Like, dude, not everybody wants to do that, right? Some people don't find pleasure in those kinds of things. Everyone has to find their own way. The thing is a lot of the times this mindset is cast upon us, if you will, by our society and that kind of thing. And hence why, the whole difference between people that are woke and people that are asleep. The people that are woke tend to be more gravitating towards things that make them happy themselves, whether it's, other people look and go like, say, for instance, some of the things we've discussed here is like, I want to live in bushland, self-sustaining property, not a very big, house and that kind of thing. And people are like, why would you do that? That sounds shit. Like, that's crap. And I'm like, well, okay, well, it's not for you, but this is what I want, right? They're like, yeah, well, what you need to do is, have a house on the hill, have, matching cars, BMWs in the driveway. I'm saying, yeah, that's not for me. You know what I mean? So, I agree with you, Clay. We need to find our own direction and gravitate towards that, and fuck what anyone else says. Like, you know what you want. If you sit there and you think about it, find it, gravitate towards it, because you only got one life as far as we know on this place.
What do you mean you don't want the picket fence and the 2.5 kids cope? What's wrong with you?
And the vanilla skies, how dare you? Yeah. I did at one point when I was, part of the system in the matrix.
Yeah. So, I don't know. Hopefully some of this helps in some kind of ways.
You always help me. Yes, the corpse pose. Yeah. We're talking about mattresses. Sorry. In the chat, we were talking about back pain.
Well, I've got a new pillow that I'm trying out tonight. It's like one of those, the ones that form to your shape of your head and stuff. I got one of them. I'm going to be trying them out tonight.
Like a memory foam?
Yeah, something like that. I didn't really read the box too much, but I've pulled it out. I've cleaned it off. I've got it in a pillowcase and it's sitting on the bed ready to go tonight. So I'll be testing that out, see if it alleviates some of the pain.
Oh, you have pain too? That's what I was talking about.
Yeah, neck pain, spine pain, shoulder pain.
Okay, so it's a memory foam that kind of is it just like a regular shaped pillow, or does it look different?
Yeah, it's a bit flatter and it's a bit sort of like wider than an ordinary pillow. And from what I saw on the cover, like I didn't read too much into it, but it's got like some kind of gel inside it or something. I don't know.
And you know what? I think hugs are like the memory foam of the soul.
Oh yeah, they are. Memory foam hugs.
Yeah, I've been using one of those like memory foam pillows for the last probably like 10 years. Like I love it. Like I can't even like sleep on normal pillows anymore. But yeah, I guess we're kind of like winding towards the end of the show here. We kidnapped Azaria and drag her on the show.
Yes, thank you. It was fun again.
Did Shane decide he was going to get you a new mattress?
He's ignoring me. So we'll have to just keep picking on him, make sure he gets me one.
How dare you, Shane? How dare you?
Yeah, the Copes thing. How dare you?
How dare you, good sir? How dare you?
I love it. Yeah, you definitely say it the best.
So
it's the accent. It's the Aussie accent. What can I say?
Anybody have like a 5 minute topic or we I mean, I guess we could make like 5 minutes of weird noises, but like that would be,
That's a long one.
yeah, I don't know if I can really pull off 5 minutes of weird noises.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's a
Well,
pretty tall order.
Did you want to touch on the idiocracy that I posted the other day about people calling in 000 because Facebook and Insta was down?
Oh God, yeah.
I
Let's
couldn't believe that. Honestly.
What happened?
Well, I don't know if I think it was in parts of the US as well, but like Facebook and Instagram went down for like X amount of time. And people in Australia, at least anyway, when they discovered that they could not log on and post their selfies and all that kind of crap on Facebook and Insta, they got really concerned and they dialed 000, which is the equivalent of 911 in the States, and dialed in an emergency because they couldn't log into Facebook and Instagram. This
Oh
is the
my
society
God.
that we live in.
Wow. That's insane.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're not like Steemit, you know, like they actually have like billion users or something like that. So, and like could you imagine if all of us called 911 when Steam was getting DDoSed, and then like
Right.
What's the
like
thing?
go from there and then like multiply the number by like 100 million, and like that many calls.
Yeah. Well, to be honest, the same time, I think Steemit was having issues as well because I was trying to like make posts and stuff like that, and it was the same day we were having issues like just a couple of days ago, and I'm just like, man, this is crazy shit. Like, who the hell calls 911 right to say I can't log in on Facebook and post a selfie? Like, what the hell is wrong with people?
I can't even believe that happened. That's insane.
Must be a terrorist attack.
I think we've got short attention spans. You know, it's what's been happening over time period. You know, and we've got that instant gratification, the need for instant gratification, and we're in that disposable era where if it doesn't work, we've got to complain about it straight away. Like, how dare you? I'm supposed to be able to access my thing, and you just can't do this to me. I feel so hurt that I can't do my stuff. I don't know. I fear for for the future if this is going to continue.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, like I don't think it's so much, you know, like scary to me that they did it. I think it's probably more worrisome to me that we live in a society that is like so detached that like people legitimately feel like it's an emergency when they can't get that dopamine hit. Like they're so addicted to something and don't even realize it, you know? Like we literally have a large portion of the population that has basically been socially engineered to this like fake form of you know, like communication where it's supposed to feel like this is how you validate your thoughts and beliefs, like this is how you get your personal interaction fix, you know. Like we live in a society where people like legitimately feel like this is how you interact with another human being, and whenever you can't do that, you know, like I mean, I can kind of, I guess, see it from the perspective of like if you walked outside and there wasn't any humans around, like, God, it kind of like makes me think of my grandma, right? Like she's like so detached from society at this point that like she literally spends, I would say like 95% of her time on Facebook and playing Farmville. So you know, like people can actually be that afraid whenever something like this happens.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely have introverted tendencies. I could see that happening to me. That's why it's important to me to have something to do, like some kind of job or something, some reason to leave the house. Because if I don't have a reason to leave the house, um, I might not. I might turn into that.
Okay, guys, so we're here at the end now. Thank you all for joining us for the 52nd episode of Coffee and Philosophy on MSP Waves. You guys want to say goodbye?
Izzy?
Oh yes, you are all you are all lovely people. I love you.
Coolest. Thanks for listening to the crazy ramblings that we had here tonight. Much love. Thanks for having us on, Clay. Thanks for joining us, Izzy. Much love. Keep your sugs.